Hello, Bitcoiners. Thank you very much. Hello. It's good to be with you.
Bitcoiners raised $100 million for Trump, and then all of a sudden Trump goes from Bitcoin detractor to Bitcoin proponent overnight. That's how that works.
Yeah. It's like, there's real value in here.
Well, that's why Bitcoin succeeds, right? Because everyone is paid for it to succeed.
You're reading these articles and gaining this understanding of like what's wrong with the central banking system, how everything is corrupt, how everything is a scam. No one else in my circle believes this. No one else in my circle even sees this reality that I'm seeing right here. And then I'm not necessarily the crazy one. The world is kind of crazy right now.
Well, we change all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Constantly. Heraclitus said no man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and it's not the same man. So to say like, oh, I am framed, I am fixed, I am unchangeable, like you're deluding yourself.
To me, it's fascinating that none of this stuff is really taught. You have to seek this knowledge out.
Yeah.
And it's so integral for a man's development, and especially this day and age.
Like, how long will you persist in doing what you think to be the right thing, even when you are facing or incurring penalties for it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one of those tests of masculine frame. Welcome to the What is Money Show, a podcast about wisdom, intelligence, and meaning. If this is your first time listening, I strongly recommend you go through the first 9 episodes, which are my series with Michael Saylor that lay much of the groundwork for the concepts we explore on this show. Thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I think the best place you can start is episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The WiM podcast is 100% sponsor-based. I strive to be selective about the sponsors I work with and only partner with those that showcase values that align with the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, and self-sovereignty. So I'll do a few ad reads right here at the top of the show, then a few in the middle, and I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as these are hand-selected sponsors and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Well, a lot of people talk about Bitcoin, but few people seem to understand that it is not just a technology, right? That's a very obvious thing that Bitcoin is. It's this new digital money. But there's also this social dimension to Bitcoin, or what a lot of people call the social layer, where we are actually components of the Bitcoin system, human beings. And as it turns out, when you really kind of get into the rabbit hole, we're actually core operating components of the Bitcoin system. Like it works on us as much as it works through us. Why do you, I guess, how would you define it? First of all, does that make sense the way I'm describing it? Mm-hmm. And why do you consider the Bitcoin social layer to be such an undervalued aspect of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the way I describe it. I say we are focused on, there's the technological layer, there's cultural layer, there's even ideological layer, but the social layer is made up of both us as individuals and then the relationships that we form with other individuals within the network. So when we're meeting in meetups, when we're connecting on Twitter, developing relationships over podcasts, that's basically what the Bitcoin social layer is. And I think the reason why it's the undervalued part of Bitcoin is because those relationships are gaining in power and in importance over time. As the Bitcoin network grows, the more influential, the more capable those relationships can become of creating real life value and creating and generating beauty, generating positive experiences, and just what our society is made up of.
Yeah, there's like, so as Bitcoin continues to succeed, obviously all of the people that hold Bitcoin then have more purchasing power. They are more wealthy. They can bring more capital to bear on any given situation. They can invest more in different projects to try and solve different customer problems. But if I hear you correctly, there's another side to this too. It's that those individuals that have been interacting inside of Bitcoin, social media, events, other more focused retreats, etc., which obviously you're doing some of this and we'll talk about later. Those relationships can pay more dividends, so to speak, right? That, you know, more opportunities to start even more businesses, raise more capital, do more things, move the world, you know, put a positive dent in the universe, so to speak.
Right.
And so the social layer of Bitcoin is not just then, because there's, and so I guess I should say this, it's usually the protocol broken down into the protocol layer and the social layer. The protocol layer being kind of like the hardware and the energy that's being allocated into or what do we say, executing the rules basically of the Bitcoin network. The social layer, which are the actual nodes, people operating their own nodes, are choosing the rules that the protocol layer executes. And so that feedback loop is what makes Bitcoin work, right? So people often say, oh, well, if Bitcoin's just open source software, let me just copy paste it and poof, 21 million Bitcoin obliterated. I just printed 21 million more. And so, but that critique betrays an ignorance of the social layer. And the analogy you often hear here is, well, you can fork the rules of chess, but no one's going to play with you, right? So it's like whatever the social consensus is on in terms of a rule set, that is what defines Bitcoin. The protocol layer really just becomes the enforcement mechanism for that.
Right.
So there's that where it's like, okay, the social layer is part of Bitcoin, but it's also, and this is what's so weird about Bitcoin, it's also operating within us, right? The people that actually adopt these principles, live by Bitcoin, live, breathe, and eat Bitcoin, can't shut up about Bitcoin. They actually create relationships in the real world that let them be more effective at various projects that require higher degrees of cooperation, coordination, etc. So so we're working inside of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's also working inside of us. And this is probably why it's such a weird thing to talk about oftentimes.
Yeah. And there's also a real sense in which we, throughout time, like the any way that any company, any human organization that's ever occurred, always the most important aspect of that is the people who are involved. And so if you're undertaking any kind of project, if you're building a podcast, if you're building a business, the most important aspect of that is who is going to be involved with that project. And so that's, I think, what you're discovering, or what we're discovering in building out Bitcoin companies, building out, attempting to spur Bitcoin adoption in various areas, is like who you're doing things with is always the most, the key part. And a lot of us who come to understand Bitcoin and understand its importance in what's going on in the world right now are looking at, we want to create businesses, we want to create value and preserve, build wealth for our families and provide value for other people. But the people we want to do those things with are pretty much only Bitcoiners, people who understand and are enthusiastic about this new monetary asset, which is one way to describe it. But yeah, it's this fascinating thing where Bitcoiners go deep down the rabbit hole, and then I think maybe it's part of that process as well, where you're going down this journey of understanding, and you can feel like you're very alone in that process, because if you are a lone coiner out just kind of learning about this thing on the internet, and you're reading these articles and gaining this understanding of like what's wrong with the central banking system, what's wrong with the corporatocracy, how everything is corrupt, how everything is a scam. And like, no one else in my circle believes this. No one else in my circle even sees this reality that I'm seeing right here. And then you find Bitcoin Twitter, or you go to a meetup and you're talking to someone, you're like, you see that too?
Yeah.
I saw that too. Yeah. I'm not necessarily the crazy one.
Yeah.
The world is kind of crazy right now, but we're kind of like seeking truth and kind of finding each other.
Yes.
In this way.
Well, that's a great way. I've never heard that term used before, the lone coiner. I think a lot of people probably start out that way because you are typically going into the Bitcoin rabbit hole through the internet, basically, right? Independent internet research for the most part. Maybe you're lucky and you have a friend nearby that's sort of dragging you along and orange pilling you. But a lot of people, especially in that kind of post-pandemic world when everyone was locked in their homes, that seemed to be the moment where, well, the state was showing its teeth a little bit. People were like, this doesn't seem right. People are doing a lot of internet research on a lot of different things. And it seemed around that time, a lot of people started to discover Bitcoin. Obviously, big price pump, post-money print helped as well.
Right.
But that journey, at least initially, can make you quite the social pariah, because you're literally, everything that you thought was real, and that likely those around you, if you thought it was real, it's very likely you're in a cultural context that assumed those things were real too, right? Like whatever the government says is true, and the money's real, and finance is not a scam, all of those things start to get obliterated one by one as you're going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And eventually you almost have like no bearings in a way, right? You're like, well, what is real? What can I hold on to that doesn't move,
right?
That Bitcoin doesn't obliterate.
Right.
And there's not much actually. You get pretty deep, and it's, you get to like the basic levels of human operating software, which is often religion, right? People are like, oh, these are the things that have worked for thousands of years. But then to connect with someone through Bitcoin meetup or at a Bitcoin event or Bitcoin Twitter, whatever the thing may be, and you discover that you're not alone. You're not, well, you might be a social pariah in certain contexts, but there are certain other contexts where you will find people of a like mind, of a similar ilk, that have been on similar journeys. That's a very rewarding experience. And the other thing it did for me, I was going through all this in like 2017, 2018, to find those people and then to see that they're very intelligent people, very hardworking people. Almost all Bitcoiners are entrepreneurial in some capacity. I struggle to think of anyone who's not. And to see that they've been on their own type of journey, similar but not the same as yours, and they've arrived at pretty much the same conclusion, that Bitcoin is a really, really big deal.
Right.
That to me radically deepened my conviction, Because it's one thing for me, it's like, oh, you go on this journey and you think you figured something out, and not you're not alone, by the way. You're reading the writings of other people, so it's like we're all interdependent in that way. But you feel kind of like you're in this your own little tunnel of the rabbit hole.
Right.
But then you get to this point where you see that, oh, there's all kinds of people that have come at this thing from different ways, yet we all arrive at the same conclusion. You get that consilience effect, and you start to realize, oh, for me at least, it's like, oh, this thing must actually be really true. All of this crazy radical stuff I've been telling my friends about the central bank and how Bitcoin fixes this and fixes that. It's like, well, maybe there's actually some real grip here. And that's why I really encourage people to go to Bitcoin events, actually, because it's, if you've only sat in your little internet pod doing your research, and sure, you may have been orange pilled yourself, or been orange pilled by someone else, but until you go and interact with people in real life, I don't think it really sinks in. Like the visceral nature of the movement that's unfolding doesn't really sink into your bones until you go and see it.
Right.
And you see how much entrepreneurial activity is occurring, and how excited people are. And this is really, really good for the Bitcoin journey.
Yeah, absolutely. You see the art, you see the
art.
I mean, that's what we do. We're creating, we're expressing, and we're relating with each other. And if your reality is made up of relationships and creations that are solely from products of, we say the fiat realm, I think you'll be surprised when you come and actually start to build relationships with individuals who see what you're seeing. And it's tremendously valuable.
As you're saying that, it reminded me too that one of my favorite experiences about meeting, and we're using this term Bitcoiners. Like, I don't know where you draw the line. Like, you kind of just know them when you meet them, right? That people that have...
Yeah, I liken it to like surfing and surfers, right? Because you surf one time or you like to watch surfing, it doesn't make you a surfer.
Yes.
But if you're like going surfing every chance that you get and you're absolutely obsessed over it, then you're a surfer, I guess. That's
probably a good analogy, because I'm not a surfer. I've just been surfing, I don't know, 60, 70 times maybe. I don't know, not a lot, but a few for someone. And I really enjoy it. But I wouldn't call myself a surfer, right? I don't know the lingo. I don't know all the etiquette. Sometimes I get out there and they're like, oh, you're supposed to go left and you went right. Like, I'm still that kind of guy. So, but for Bitcoiners, it probably comes through in the jargon a lot when someone throws out Lindy effect without explaining it. You're like, oh, okay, this guy probably knows. But then once you know that, oh, there's another Bitcoiner, then the conversation immediately accelerates. It's like there's no more small talk. Like, if you just meet someone cold, you're like, what? Where are you from? What do you do? What are your views? So you're trying to feel them out and get this sense for what is their moral, ethical compass, values. Do I like this person or not? But if you determine, as a Bitcoiner, oh, this person is a Bitcoiner, then all those things are automatically like, oh, we're aligned, right? We're aligned on the mission, what Bitcoin represents, et cetera. Let's just skip the small talk and go to the interesting stuff, basically.
Right.
And so what I find myself at these Bitcoin conferences, it's like you're just thrown from one deep, interesting conversation to another.
Right.
And people are always like, they're out there with these crazy ideas or business projects they're working on, or they're telling you about some scientific rabbit hole of some sort or another. But it's just like from one to another to another to another. And like that, for me, has been very intellectually satisfying versus going to just, I don't know, a music festival.
Right.
And you're just meeting people like, oh, you like this song? Oh, me too. Okay. Where are you from? It's just, it cuts through all of that cuts through all of that friction that is standard with most new relationships. And you're just kind of in the deep end together initially, which makes Bitcoin gatherings fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it seems as though that's something that is missing from our world, from most people's lives now. Like, I'm very privileged to have very deep, meaningful relationships and great friendships, and I have been throughout my life. But I think the reality is that there's like vast majority of people don't have that. They don't have any true point of connectivity, and have a poverty of relationships and of friends who, and you know, that could be from just a lack of focusing on that aspect of their life. But when you seek that like knowledge, and when you seek that connectivity with others, it can be a beautiful thing.
Why do you think that is? What is, I mean, some people from the outside might say it's a tenuous connection to be like, what are you talking about? You guys have better money, so now you have better relationships and culture. Like, well, no, that's like two different domains, right? But it does seem intuitively true to me, but I do have a difficult time sort of bridging the gap. I mean, we've explored it and explained it in a lot of different ways on the show, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What is it about Bitcoin that's leading us to develop more authentic connections and or cultural formations?
Well, I think that it's I can only speak from my own experience. Dealing with Bitcoin has caused me to face, has forced me to face the certain inadequacies about myself and certain limitations that I have, and so I've had to grapple with that and recognize that if I'm going to take this thing seriously, I need to do my due diligence and understand it try to understand it from first principles if possible, and then take the discipline and learn how to store it properly, learn how to manage it and own it properly. So if you're, I think that there's something around that where since it's a personal responsibility movement, it's drawing and it's attracting people who are more interested in that, who are interested in taking control of their life and cultivating their own agency in money, but that translates to other aspects of your life as well. So I think in the environments, in the retreats that I've been on, in just the adventures that I've taken with other Bitcoiners, you can hold each other more accountable to just owning up to your shit, to just having making sure that you maintain independence in those environments. And so I think it just makes it so that you're more enjoyable to be around. In a certain sense. And then also you're not like blaming, you're less likely to blame other people for things. It helps to cultivate a more healthy interpersonal relationship, in my opinion.
I love how I've never heard it called that, but that's an excellent framing. Bitcoin as a personal responsibility movement, because it does boil down to that ultimately, right? Is that Bitcoin is a tool that radically empowers the individual, but as Spidey's Uncle Ben told him, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Two sides of the same coin. You can't have all of this individualized power and freedom, independence from state overreach, all of these things Bitcoin affords us without adopting the mantle of responsibility that comes with it.
Right.
But then that is not limited to just your monetary / financial sphere, right? It's attracting people that are into personal responsibility.
Right.
Therefore, you get communities that are less finger pointing, blame, gossip. Like it's more like, oh no, like we'll just take the responsibility ourselves and keep marching forward. And that too, I think you said earlier too, forced you to take account of your own inadequacies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I see common among people going into Bitcoin, let's say, is that you do take inventory of your life, right? You start to look at yourself with a more, I guess you're zooming out on human history in a way. And in doing so, you become a smaller and smaller and smaller part of the whole picture.
Right.
And then so you're able to take a more objective inventory of what you actually bring to the table and don't bring to the table.
Right.
And in general, with that higher transcendent viewpoint, you're more capable of just marking things off the list that you're not adequate or you're not satisfied with about yourself, whatever those things are.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in shape. You're not running a profitable business. You don't have enough kids. You drink too much. Whatever the bad thing is, per your own judgment, you get that view on it, and then here's the good things. So like, let me mark off the bad things and try to add to the good things. Mm-hmm. And that general movement seems to be what characterizes people going to the Bitcoin rabbit hole. It's like it's not all exactly the same,
right?
But they're moving away from the things that they would deem themselves as not good or inadequate at, and moving towards things that they are good or more or are adequate at, let's say. Mm-hmm. And what other community would you want to be a part of?
Right.
It's like, that's the team I want to be on. I want to be on the team where everyone's trying to level up all the time. Or what other team that's the same relationship I want to be in, by the way. Like one of my number one things is someone who's very oriented towards personal growth. Because we're all going to fuck up all the time. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to get on each other's nerves or piss people off, piss one another off, or have disagreements. But it's how do you recover from those slips? How do you transform those trials and tribulations into growth and wisdom? Like that's what I would want in a romantic partner. That's what I want in my friends. So of course, that's what you want in a community as well, right? If instead you're in a community that's very fragile and every time something bad happens, it's finger pointing and who did it and all that. It's like, that community has no coherence.
Right.
So it's interesting. Again, this sounds like just a bunch of words, but you do see it in Bitcoin, I think. You actually go to these Bitcoin events and people they're tight-knit, they're resilient, they're taking on personal responsibility, they're building things that are changing the world, they're advancing the adoption of Bitcoin, and it really does start with this ideology or philosophy or religion. I don't know where you draw the line between those things.
Right.
That is Bitcoin.
Yeah. I don't try to draw the line. I just embrace it.
Yeah.
But I think humility is a big part of that as well. It's coming to mind.
Yeah.
Matt Odell, stay humble, stack sats.
Yes.
Like it's just kind of ingrained in the principles.
Yeah.
That we embrace. It's like, well, have an honest estimation of your own worth, your own value, what you're actually able to do, and recognize we kind of mess up sometimes, so we need to take precautions so that the money isn't in our hands for once, in our control, and also take precautions on your own self-custody and that kind of thing. It'll like Marty and Matt say so often, like if you are, Bitcoin will humble you, if you don't take it seriously, and that's how nature is in general, right? Nature will humble you.
Even if you take it seriously, I would argue. It's going to humble you no matter what.
Right. Right.
Right. You can take surfing very seriously, but I bet you still get humbled on a couple of waves.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And you have to have that ultimate respect, and eventually you can even realize that as many precautions as you can take, you still might die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Surfing, whether you're surfing or whether you're in business or whatever, like that's the risk of being alive is, we're going to die eventually.
Yes.
And especially as you try to immerse yourself further into nature and explore, which is one of the parallels, one of the connections that I see with surfing and Bitcoin is we're using this tool, this surfboard, to go out into the chaos and use it to maneuver and to ride energy that's transmitted from thousands of miles away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times those energy vortexes can be just massive, right? And really scary. But we're trying to use our skill combined with technology to harness the energy of nature and for our own enjoyment,
create a
for
beautiful
the thrill
ride
of it, to make it beautiful.
Yeah.
And just because it's fucking fun.
Yeah.
And but it's also beautiful to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's work, right? It's work, technique, discipline. You actually talk about beautiful. It's beautiful to watch someone riding a big wave. Obviously, an amazing feat of human achievement.
Right.
You also become beautiful in the process, right? You're there baking in the sun, getting in shape. Your person, like, I love hanging out. When I lived in Hawaii, these people that surf a lot, they're just so fucking happy, dude. I'm like, how do I get on your level of happiness? That's what really inspired me to surf more. I was like, they were just so unbelievably positive and happy. And, well, how could you not be? I mean, you're out there playing in the ocean all day, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's a lot of, you can break it down in all these different ways, but a lot of it comes down to just being forced to be present to the moment as well. And that's why the surfing community is, one of these like parallel communities to Bitcoin in a lot of ways, where they have to be humble and have a proper estimation of their skill. It's a meritocracy. There's either you can surf or you can't. Yeah. There's no like faking it.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
No fiat surfing. Right.
Right. Yeah. So that's, I guess that's a side tangent. But
no, but in general, I think that's a good analogy, whatever. Sports in general. And I think you see athletes being more attracted to Bitcoin recently. Probably for that very reason, right? It's sport is a no bullshit territory, right? It's doesn't matter what political clout or charisma or rhetoric you have. It's like you can either compete in the sport or not, right? And it's pretty clear to everyone whether you can surf or not, for instance. And so, but in those other domains of competition like politics, where you're not measured objectively, let's say, right? Politicians are just in the business of purveying promises of this, I'll do this and that, whatever, if you elect me. And then ultimately, 9 times out of 10, it's just all bullshit. It's all hot air. There's not that objective measurement criteria. It's almost like politics is the opposite of sport in a way, right? Sport is
like you're
put your money where your mouth
good
is.
grifter.
Yes, exactly. Where sport is like, put your money where your mouth is. Totally, right? It's like, just shut up and play, play the game. But politics is, the game is the lip smacking, basically. Right. And so, well, surprise, surprise.
Deception.
Athletes are attracted to honest money because it's an honest game, just like sport. And politicians, although some of them are coming around now because Bitcoin has this interesting, Bitcoiners raised $100 million for Trump, and then all of a sudden Trump goes from Bitcoin detractor to Bitcoin proponent overnight. That's how that works.
Yeah. It's like, there's real value in here.
Yes.
I can make money from this.
Yeah, and that's how Well, that's why Bitcoin succeeds, right? Because everyone is paid for it to succeed. No matter what nook or cranny of this world you work in, you will end up adopting Bitcoin either out of necessity or because it pays you to adopt it. The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okefarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. So this sounds like making an argument for, it's almost like a logical argument for why you should be a Bitcoiner, or at least study Bitcoin, let's say. But this isn't how cultures actually change. What is the role of, I might be asking the same question I did earlier in a different way, but it's like, Bitcoin's just a new incentive system. So it's like, what is the role of incentives in driving cultural change? And I don't think culture, the other thing I would add here is culture doesn't seem to me to change based on rational argument alone. Maybe there is a rational argument component, right? Underneath kind of the ethical structure. It's like, oh, well, the reason we don't kill each other is because society would vanish. There might be a rational reason down there. But it seems to me that culture sort of propagates through imitation, right? It's like there's hierarchies, people at the top of the hierarchy act a certain way. They become successful for whatever set of patterns of action that they use and adopt, and then other people imitate those patterns of action. Mm-hmm. So what is the role, I guess, of incentives and imitation in driving cultural change, do you think?
I think it's integral. Because just the way we are social beings. We evolved to be in tribes, tribes of 150 to 200 people. Mm-hmm. And we're used to social hierarchies, social structures. And we're used to just interacting with people. That's, and I like the way that Evan Pagan put it, like, we are the product of the 5 people we hang around most. Mm-hmm. And we become like the people around us, whether we like it or not. Mm-hmm. And we're much more moldable. We often think about ourselves as these like autonomous beings that just like exist and we're static. We're like a stone or something like that that doesn't change. But the reality is, if you look at the trajectory of your life, you fluctuate and change drastically. Your personality and your sense of humor, your the way you look, all of it fluctuates depending on who you're around, what your environment is. And that's the way that all of like natural creatures are. You know, we're built to be in a certain environment, and an ecosystem also. So if you kind of take a plant out of Costa Rica and put it in the desert, it withers and dies, right? But if you have it in its proper environment, it can grow into this massive tree that's just like an amazing, majestic thing to look at. So for like social, bring it to Bitcoin adoption, you know, like we were talking about earlier, we have all of these true ideas, what we found to be true ideas, and really impactful, meaningful information. And you and I have gone down and read and written about it and spoken about it so much. And, you know, when I was kind of understanding it, I was sharing all the podcasts I could with my friends and family and telling them to read these articles. But ultimately, like, none of that had as much of an impact as I wanted it to, because that's not really the way that people are changing their behavior. I think like they're pinging their environment, and their environment is different from mine. So it's not, it's certain things that are landing for me aren't going to land in a way that it's in the same way for other people.
Yeah.
So what I'm focused on, or what I think is more important for Bitcoiners who want to inspire Bitcoin adoption and convey the gospel of Satoshi to the world, is to think about it in more of a holistic way of, well, what are all of the influences on people? What are creating the incentives? And the biggest thing is people's community, people's relationships, what their friends think, who they're seeing in social media as the most important, like most influential, popular person. What are they doing? And most people are just imitating and absorbing from all of those people what their values are, and that's how they're generating and creating their own world and what they focus on in life.
Yeah, this is, wow, man, one of the most fascinating areas of Bitcoin when I started thinking about what the shape of Bitcoin's future looks like. And I guess first would say that I'm of a strong view that it is those people who are most successful in their relevant domain that propagate these signals or the patterns of behavior, let's say, that other people imitate. Right? This is the word role model, right? When you see your favorite athlete drinking the water or whatever, you are subconsciously going to buy that water, right? This is why advertisement is a thing. It's not really attacking your conscious mind or let's say advertising to your conscious mind. Like, you know that when you see, they often talk about that example of like, you see a beer commercial and there's 10 people in the bar and everyone's smiling and happy, and they're all drinking Michelob Ultra. Right. Everyone's fit and tan and good looking. It's like, you know, your conscious mind knows that's not what a bar looks like. You go into a bar and it's just sad people and drinking. It's like not like that at all.
Right.
Yet your subconscious mind just starts to make this association, like, oh, young, fit, happy, healthy Michelob Ultra. And then, you know, you see it 7 or 10 times, and before you know it, you're buying Michelob Ultra. I'm just picking on a beer here. I don't drink, whatever.
They're sponsoring the pod.
But yeah, they're not sponsoring the pod. I do not drink beer or Michelob Ultra. But it's that sort of latent human proclivity to just imitate that actually drives cultural change, right? And that's why I think social media is such a big deal, right? We've kind of democratized that entire thing. And instead of having your favorite athletes on the Wheaties box, now it's, well, you follow whoever you think is best at whatever they do, and that's who you end up imitating. So how does Bitcoin play into this? It's like, well, again, as Bitcoiners become more wealthy, others are actually seeing Bitcoiners ascend the hierarchy, right? So you're like, oh, well, this guy that's been in Bitcoin, I've been talking about Bitcoin for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. He's actually more wealthy. He used that wealth to start this business to become a more liberated individual and create these certain changes in the world that suited his vision. Well, I want to do that too. How do I become more like him or her? And then they start to imitate them in, both in how they're acting and engaging with the world, but also probably just their views on Bitcoin, right? You'll see people actually get flipped on their Bitcoin views through this process.
Right.
And so if there's some semblance of truth to that, maybe that's not the entire argument, but maybe that's part of it at least. I would also just say the work of Rene Girard's very interesting here. He writes a lot about mimetic desire and how he thinks humans derive all of their desires from one another. Like we're imitating each other's desires all the time. We imitate straight out of the womb, basically. Like you engage with your mother when you're born and you start imitating her facial expressions. And we never stop doing that. Right. And I think if you look at yourself intuitively, at least for me, when I started to read this work, I found myself with these little subroutines I had picked up from friends along the years. Like I could feel myself making a certain facial expression that, oh yeah, my other friend used to do this, or saying things a certain way, like, oh yeah, that friend used to do that. And it's like, I was this composite of all these little sub-personalities I had picked up along the way.
Right.
I think if you do that analysis on yourself, you'll see something similar. Like we are imitative creatures.
Totally.
So if that is somewhat true, and then, Bitcoiners are becoming more wealthy, then it then becomes incumbent upon you as a Bitcoiner to literally BTC, be the change, be the change you want to see in the world. Because if you want the world to change more broadly, well, then you have to start with yourself. And so Bitcoiners, what do we need to do? As we're saying here,
right?
We love freedom. We should live the best lives possible. We should be the healthiest and most fit we can possibly be. We should have the best sex. We should have the best relationships. We should have the most beautiful families. We should throw the best parties. Like, whatever you want to see happening in the world around you, as you ascend that hierarchy of whatever, whether that's your own local competence hierarchy, the business you work for, the more broad hierarchy of wealth, that you need to take that freedom or energy, power that you've accumulated, purchasing power, and then recycle it into becoming the changes you actually want to see reflected in the world. Because that appears to me to be the best route to actually create that change. Again, talking and rationalizing, these are all useful things for kind of laying the groundwork.
Sure.
But then when it comes to actually executing, you've got to do the do step, right? Take the action, so to speak. And so what do we do then? I know you're doing some retreat stuff. Like how would you encourage or suggest that Bitcoiners take this individual liberty or purchasing power that they are accumulating through Bitcoin and redeploy it into the world in a way that creates positive change?
Yeah, I think, one way is to embark on a path of personal development. I think that's kind of a basic process that, like, I guess in my life, I've had multiple times where I've kind of reached a crisis of some kind and been like, all right, I got to get my shit together in this area. And no one else is coming to save me. No one else is going to like fix this aspect of my life. So I need to take action and figure it out. And those are usually difficult processes to undertake. But it's incredibly rewarding. And then what I found is you start to build this like positive feedback loop of, since you're working on developing this area, whether it's a fear of public speaking and you're going to you're going to Toastmasters, and then you're around other guys and women who are also kind of overcoming that fear of public speaking, right? And you start to do it more amongst each other, and you see the growth in each other, and you see your own growth as well. And in my experience, like I've just gotten more and more addicted to those types of environments where I'm around other people who are working on these aspects of themselves, or whatever it is that I'm focused on. So I think it's very important to, if that is something that you see in your life, where you have a deficit in your lifestyle, in like maybe your finances are now finally on point because you found Bitcoin and you took the risk to actually better that aspect of your life, and you found other Bitcoiners as well who are finally achieving a certain amount of financial freedom. It's a beautiful thing, and it's amazing to be creating that abundance, that monetary abundance, and material abundance as well for yourself and for your families. But then you keep looking upwards and thinking, well, what does the rest of my life look like? My health is shit. I'm drinking a lot. What am I putting into my body? Am I even considering that? Like, or am I just, habitually eating things that are in front of me? And so like we were talking about, there's an environmental aspect of that. I know I have friends who have come to these realizations, and then they come to, say, the retreat that I did in El Salvador 2 months ago, and where it's this curated environment. We've got a mansion right by the beach. Every morning we're getting up and doing a beach workout. We're training, doing some jiu-jitsu. We're training on surfing. We're facing fears, going out into the ocean, and then we're coming together for these masterminds where we're opening up about each other's lives and what are some of our biggest struggles, what are our biggest opportunities, and kind of like going in depth on those things. And some of the guys are realizing, well, man, I've like this environment, this kind of positive group is really helping me to, be someone that I like being. And when I think about going back home to this certain set of relationships, I just know that I'm just going to get sucked into like more drinking lifestyle. The TV's always on at home with my current girlfriend or something like that. And they're recognizing that there's more to be had. So yeah, I think that you have to, in order to level up, you have to take the action yourself of like seeking help, recognizing like I need help in a lot of different ways. And I had deficiencies. I still have deficiencies. They're few, but we, you know, I'm going to seek out mentorship. I'm going to seek out help for those deficiencies.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to create is an environment to like, I don't have all the fucking answers.
Yeah.
But we've built an incredible social network just in Bitcoin itself. And there are so many amazing people who have tremendous expertise in these different areas, and they can help. We can lift each other up, I guess is what I'm saying. And conferences are an amazing resource. Conferences are great to go and just like start the path of like actually connecting to other Bitcoiners and finding some other people you have things in common with. And so that I think does help to create more of a broad social network. But I think what's needed for more personal change is deeper relationships and more intimate experiences, I guess. And so that's more of what I'm interested in is helping to cultivate that deeper community, deeper experience of growth.
Yeah, it's so important. It's interesting because it's like we're almost saying that, okay, you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you unconsciously become like the people you spend the most time with. But if you make that conscious, then you can engineer your life so that you spend time around people that you want to be more like.
Exactly.
Right. So you can turn this unconscious process into a conscious endeavor, and then you can actually architect the trajectory of your life more effectively.
Right.
The Carl Jung quote, paraphrasing, until you make the unconscious conscious, then it will continue to direct your life and you will call it fate. So it's like you can actually turn fate into something that you are in more control of. Obviously, you never control everything, but this is one of the most important ways, I think, to actually change yourself, right? Is to change your surroundings. And so therefore, community, right? It's just, well, what community are you plugged into? Because you're not only contributing to that community, but that community is contributing to you.
Right.
And I got this from Vervaeke, but he was decomposing the word community into common unity. And it's really, this is the human superpowers, that we can organize ourselves under these symbolic canopies and point all of ourselves towards one aim, right? So the point of comparison would be like a group of chimps. You know, a chimp troop might be a few hundred strong, but you can unite 100,000 people under a flag, or in the case of the United States, 330 million apes united under one flag, the flag of the United States. So the fact that we can organize ourselves under symbols gives us this capacity to cooperate in large numbers that puts us at the top of the food chain, basically. This is the human superpower. But when I think about that, these points of common unity, obviously there's many of them. There's been many throughout history. I don't think any of them have been universal, right? Even today, we mentioned the United States. Well, there's also 190 plus other nation states that you may be a part of.
Right.
They each have their own currency. Those are different symbolic structures people organize beneath. Different languages are spoken, different cultural norms. But Bitcoin is kind of interesting here in that I think it might be the first actual global universal point of common unity, that we're all just going to eventually accept this thing, like the internet. I guess maybe the internet would be a good analogy. the internet's pretty much eaten the world at this point. I don't,
Right.
not the whole world. Well, there's 8+ billion people on Earth, and there's like 5.5 billion internet users. So it's
Yeah.
almost eaten the world, not entirely. But that it's to the extent you consider the internet to be a point of unity. It's like a place where people all gather or a thing that people all use. It has become a rather universal or global point of common unity. So therefore, there is a global internet community. Do you think Bitcoin could follow that same path, like becoming the global community? And then what are the implications of that?
Yeah. So I think that the way I describe it is kind of going to, I like to bring up Robert Pirsig and the art Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
And Leela.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you turned me on to Leela.
Yeah.
And what he talks about in that book is in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is this idea of quality, right? But it's also one of the things that he says is there's a growing interconnected network of information growing with the internet, and the globe is being connected on the information level more like faster and faster, so that like what is new is becoming basically the most important thing. Because immediate transfer of information across the globe is paramount. It is possible. So most of us are focused on mostly like what is new, whereas Robert was asking, he's saying, I'm more interested in what is best. And that's the question that I'm asking. And that's kind of what he was getting at in that book, I think. And so he draws this parallel to a valley of tributaries where you have tributaries of water all throughout this entire valley that are all interconnected. But when you flood the valley with water, all of the tributaries, since they're very shallow, they overflow. And it all just becomes one big mess. And there's no way to distinguish one channel from the other. And it makes differentiation very difficult. And that's what we find, I think, in today's online world, where there's just so much information and it's all very shallow. It's all just being transferred so quickly and on these siloed social media channels, and some of it's censored, and it's so hard to know like what the hell is going on, what is real and what is true, and most of all, like what's best, like what should we be focused on. And so he's saying, I want to deepen the channels of human connectivity, and so that those tributaries are deep and able to withstand larger amounts of information flow. I think that's what I think Bitcoin is doing for humanity, where we have the internet connecting us on an information level. Because Bitcoin is a value network on top of the internet, it's deepening those connected channels, so that we can see and direct proper value flow through the information, and that's helping us to distinguish what's actually best to focus on, is like, where is the value going? And so I think this is really interesting. You can go into like NOSTR, and Lightning, how these kinds of things.
Can you describe a little bit about NOSTR? Because I mean, this is still new for a lot of people, and myself included. Like, just a distributed communication channel that is close to uncensorable.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a NOSTR expert, and I'm very early on my understanding of it and use of it as well. I have a Primal account, been working on it, posting and hanging out with Paul, especially down in Bitcoin Jungle. Paul and Max, and these guys we're just trying to test like what's possible with this thing, right? But NOSTR, you can say it's it's a way to distribute information so that it's not reliant on one single point of failure, one single entity. So your content and your whatever you're sharing and whatever you're building is tied to your particular key, and it's something that you can take on various types of clients, various types, all different types. Yeah, I'm gonna butcher.
So it's
understanding.
It's like
NOSTR. I don't know exactly how it works.
Social media, like applications, right? You have followers on Twitter, followers on Facebook, Instagram, etc. It's almost like you control the followers at the protocol layer instead.
Yes.
So they can follow you from application to application.
Yep.
And then you're not
also the information,
and you can't be censored, basically, right? As a result of that protocol level control.
Right.
I'm
like
also
all of your content
out of my pay grade here, so I hope that analogy makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's right. And guys can help us in the comments, I'm sure. But it's your follower count as well as your content, what you're producing and what you're curating as far as information sharing and value as well, because you can be you can get zapped for your posts. You can earn Lightning and everything there on the platform. It's all transferable, so it's not tied to any particular company, and that's the beauty of it. It also, it has a lot of value for companies that are starting up, because if you're starting up a social network or some sort of application, you need to generate a network effect within that particular application. You need to gain users. You need to start to do A/B testing to see what actually works. But if you're building on NOSTR, you already have a massive, basically user base from which to gain information and to build an application and potential customers as well. So it's really fascinating to be going down that.
Yeah, the people I know that are very, well, let's say more knowledgeable about it than I tend to look at it as the most exciting thing since Bitcoin. Maybe not as impactful as Bitcoin. I'm not sure about that, but let's say it's on the same level to some extent. I'd like to thank my friends at Swan Bitcoin for their long-standing support of the What is Money show. Swan's mission is to help millions of people get into Bitcoin, so they built the best solution to set up recurring Bitcoin buys and automatic withdrawals into cold storage. With the Swan app, it takes just 2 minutes to sign up and start buying Bitcoin. If you're a new customer, you get $10 in free Bitcoin for signing up, and the first $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy incurs 0 fees. If you're an existing Swan customer, then the next $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy now incurs 0 fees. So if you love to recommend Bitcoin to friends and family, then Swan is the best place to start. So go to swanbitcoin.com/breedlove to get started today. Again, that's swanbitcoin.com/breedlove. So we're talking offline earlier a little bit about, you mentioned the guy you follow on Twitter, Jer, who's did he originate the term masculine frame, or is it just something?
No.
Okay. Something he tweets a lot about.
Yeah.
I heard it, I think first heard that term from him, and I even ordered his book and read some of it. And there's some things that I think he speaks truly on about masculinity. And then there's some things I think that just go a step too far, where it seems like, what was the one point? There's some point where he was talking about, like, he was advocating lying to women. I think he's like, "Oh, just lie to them, whatever it is, just to make sure you always appear to have frame," which is like, I'll let you describe what that is. I was like, I don't think that makes sense. Like, you're not going to actually build a real relationship with anyone,
right,
based on bullshit,
right.
So I thought that was like, that's where I kind of drew the line with some of his content. But could you define what masculine frame is, and well, what it mean? How do you adopt or use masculine frame?
Yeah, so a good way to think about it, in my opinion, is having an unaltered view of reality, maintaining your composure, maintaining your control of emotions, maintaining, like, these are all kind of, I guess, outflows of having frame, having masculine frame, so to speak. And I guess a lot of it comes down to controlling your emotions, controlling your reality. If someone is able to easily get an emotional reaction out of you, if they're able to, if someone is highly, that's one way that's helpful to kind of look at it, is looking at, like, what is unframed behavior look like. And so if you have, if you're habitually just being spurred into spouts of anger, if you are, like, being ruled by your emotions, whether it's sadness or anything like that, you're giving up your power, your control over,
loss of sovereignty in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think a lot of it comes to agency, but also it does border on, like, elements of control as well, because as a man, I think it is important to be able to control your environment, and to, that's why I encourage quality relationships with other men who you agree with, because you want to establish, it's not necessarily an independent lone wolf thing that you're doing. We need community. We need each other. But if you, if you're not able to control the kinds of people that you want around you, then you're going to be led astray.
So it's frame is about, I'm thinking out loud here, not making this assertion per se, but to have self-control. Because when you say control your environment, I'm going back to the surfer analogy. Well, the surfer doesn't control their environment. Like, there's most, if not the vast majority of the aspects of your environment you don't control. There's a great, I heard a really inspiring talk from a football coach one time. I can't even remember his name, sorry. But he said there's only two things in life you can control, and that is your effort and your attitude. It's like almost everything else is out of your control, the outcomes, everything. So it's like, if you're, slacking on either one of those, then yeah, get on yourself about it. But everything else, you just kind of have to accept what happens.
Right.
So when, I guess I'm asking then, is masculine frame more centered on the idea of self-control and not letting your environment dissuade you from adhering to your own ethics, principles, values, etc.? Like not being, what does Jocko say? Was it Jocko? Someone said we all have an inner bitch that you have to tame.
Sure.
Is it about like taming the inner bitch and staying true to your deeper masculine wisdom?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. It's kind of, and it's also like the frame through which you are viewing reality. And so if you're allowing that inner bitch to just like react to everything and to lash out, then that's bitch behavior, right? That's and it's unframed in the sense where you're not controlling how you're interacting and interpreting reality, and you're not remaining true. You're not viewing it through the principles that you want to best represent to the world and to those around you. Yeah, you can imagine like maybe an analogy would be if that meme where you have like, I think there's a photo of the Nazis or of a group of Nazis, and everyone's like going like this, and then there's one guy who's not, right? And so he's independent of his environment. He's processing. He's acting without true to
not
his
imitating,
conviction.
which is interesting. So we were talking about imitation earlier, but the guy that's not imitating, he's kind of staying true to his principles, values, beliefs, whatever it was, to not hail Hitler in that case. Then he, by not imitating, he is holding frame, you're saying.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those, like, it seems contradictory, but in reality, that's just what works, right? If you, for a leader, for instance, if you're going to have a leadership position, you need to maintain a directive course. The captain of a ship, right? If the captain of the ship is constantly pinging his environment, his like what he should be doing, if he's uncertain in any way, the crew is constantly looking at him and wanting reassurance. They need direction in order for the ship to actually function. So for the leader, it's this lonely point where you don't have necessarily anyone to imitate. You have to step out on your own and maintain composure for the good of everyone in that environment.
Right.
So that's, I think, the best analogy. Probably the best analogy is like a captain of a ship when you're thinking about frame. For a man in his relationships, in business, in life in general.
I have to, because you,
Sure.
One of my favorite quotes comes up when you bring up the captain of a ship here. And so there's this, when you're talking about masculine frame, there might be a tendency to believe that we're saying something like, don't imitate or accept feedback from your surroundings or anyone around you, right? To just be whatever you are. But I would say that would be there's an extreme, there's a limit case there that's dangerous as well, right? Just being rigid and unchanging and stuck in your ways, right? Dogmatic. Because one of my favorite quotes, and it's actually about a captain of a ship, is the job of the captain is to see the ship through the eyes of the crew. So he's actually the center point of assimilating all of that feedback, right? Everyone's a specialist in their own little domain on the ship.
Right.
And they all report up to the captain. And then he sets the overall grand direction and propagates the commands back down so that everyone is coordinating their actions towards that common aim.
Right.
That point, the captain is the point of common unity, basically.
Right.
He is the top of the hierarchy of the ship, right? But he has to have an extension of his perceptions through the eyes and senses and skills of his crew, basically.
Right.
So the captain can't just be rigid. He can't just be this unshakable, unbendable, unchanging, dogmatic, masculine frame. He has to be, and this is where maybe the metaphor is wrong. I would challenge the metaphor of frame, because frame sounds like, oh, frame, it doesn't move. You put it in the ground, earthquake. Actually, that's a good one. It's something more like a deeply rooted tree, right? Where the tree is very deeply rooted, but when the storm comes, if that tree didn't bend a little bit in the wind, and lose a few branches occasionally, and it was perfectly rigid, well, then that tree would probably die.
Right.
This is also true for skyscrapers. When we frame them with steel, they're not designed to be perfectly rigid.
Right.
They actually have some sway built into them, some tolerance for the environmental volatility and variation.
Right.
And so there's this, I want to be careful that we're not saying like, oh, frame is just like, just pick your way, pick your dogma and never change for anyone ever, because like, that's not true. Right. First of all, it's not possible. You're going to change.
Yeah.
As we said earlier, right?
Consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds.
Yeah.
Or foolish consistency is like,
Foolish consistency. Okay, I have to think about that one. But I was thinking you said, well, we change all the time, right? Constantly. Heraclitus said, no man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and it's not the same man. Like we're always undergoing flow and change. So to say like, oh, I am framed, I am fixed, I am unchangeable, like you're deluding yourself. Like absolutely stick to your values, stick to your principles. Like I think that's very important. It's obviously very important for leadership. If you're going to be in that role, the captain seat, where you're going to actually face the storms and face the war and whatever it may be, you need to have deeply rooted principles that guide your action. If you don't have that, well, then the storms are going to rip you apart. However, there does need to be this adaptivity at the edges, right? It's not just a fixed frame. There's some sway built into the frame.
Yeah. Well, it's effective leadership, and perhaps the best way to categorize it in a psychological term and psychological language as well is like using the king archetype as cultivating your king archetype as a man is probably the closest thing to cultivating frame, because there's a shadow to it as well. There's, the shadow of the king archetype is the tyrant, where it's complete rigidity and there's no play and domineers without reason.
There's no play. That's an interesting ambiguous term, because like no play as in no fun, between, but also no play in the frame, right?
Movement.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the mature king in his fullness, and it's a lot of this is coming from this book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Yeah.
The king in his fullness is kind of the top of the triangle or the pyramid with the magician, the warrior, and the lover, taking counsel with all three, and then making proper judgments and adjudicating resources or actions from there. So
seeing the ship through the eyes of that small crew. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But to me, it's fascinating that none of this stuff is really taught or even, you have to seek this knowledge out.
Yeah.
And it's so integral for a man's development in especially this day and age where there's very little guidance for young men.
Yeah.
As to what does it look like to be a mature man and maintain proper masculine frame.
Yeah.
That and why that is important.
Yeah.
So much of the information that we're getting and so much of the propagation through media or through movies in Hollywood is kind of portraying the strong masculine as this evil, as this like thing to be avoided or to be feared. But as we see in society, the opposite is true. Like the strong masculine is that strong captain who's going to guide his crew through a storm and reach land. This is something that I'm really passionate about because for me, I struggle with that a lot in my life, where like there was there's times where where your strength wasn't necessarily rewarded or
of course, or even penalized sometimes,
or penalized, right? Yeah, it's like what's
how difficult is it to stay true to what you think is doing, what you think to be the right thing, even in the face of being penalized for doing the right thing? Like, how long will you persist in doing what you think to be the right thing, even when you are facing or incurring penalties for it? That's one of those tests of masculine frame that I think many men, probably all men at some point have been up against, right? You're trying to do what you think is the right thing.
Yeah, but everyone's telling you.
But it's going against you somehow.
Yeah, and I think it's a natural process to fail, right? We go through those failures, but we have to learn.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of failures bring unwanted consequences and after effects. But so this is this really touchy area for some reason now today, where to tell a man that it's good for you to be strong, to build power, to stay true to your principles, and to think independently and do what's best for you. That's kind of a radical thought nowadays, which is interesting.
It's strange, isn't it? And so what? It seems like as men too, well, a lot of this probably has to do with just the loss of traditional values and families that we've in general lost, right? Some people are still fortunate to have grown up in a normal nuclear family. I think at least half of people come from divorced households. There's also the whole thing since the early 1970s, households have not been able to sustain themselves on one income, right? Both mother and father have often worked. Even if you are in ideal nuclear family. Oftentimes, well, you were dumped off at daycare or whatever the thing was, so parents could keep up with inflation.
Yeah.
So there's been all of these corrosive forces on the institutions that would typically give men the rite of passage necessary to understand what it means to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And when, you were talking earlier about inadequacies, right? Personal inadequacies, and how Bitcoin, we were talking about how Bitcoin kind of gives you the zoom out, step back, take inventory, start, marking off the bad list and marking up the good list kind of thing.
Yeah.
One that I personally have struggled with and continue to struggle with, but Bitcoin has helped me, is this anger thing. Like this seems to be probably more common with the masculine energy, I think, because men tend to be solution oriented, right? We look at the world as a set of problems and we're just trying to like line them up and knock them down sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the feminine has a different viewpoint on this. Oftentimes when they're, just telling us about their day and we're like, oh, well, here's what I would do, A, B, and C. And she's like, no. Like, I just want you to listen, like just hold space. So there's some more to talk about there, but for me, the experience is encountering problems that should have been fixed a certain way, or could have been fixed better, faster, cheaper, or could have been fixed the first time, or could have been fixed the way I told someone to fix it. For instance, we had a guy here the other day fixing the kitchen cabinets. He comes in, it's just 2 cabinets that are off their hinges. I'm like, look, they just need to be put on their hinges, and when they need to be able to close. Right. He's like, yeah, I got you. I was like, okay. Yeah. Tap, cabinet fixer guy. I assume you know what you're doing. I mean, you fix cabinets for a living, so I'm going to go over here and work.
Right.
He, does this thing, leaves the house. I come back out. The cabinets close, but they close about 2 inches apart. Like, who the fuck fixes cabinets that don't close all the And so I start to get frustrated. I'm like, what the fuck does this guy do? Like, he hangs cabinets for a living. He's a cabinet specialist. You come to my house. I'm sitting there. Like, do I need to hold your shoulders and watch you complete the job to make sure they close? Like, I start to get this. And that's where I guess I need to understand that I'm losing frame. I'm actually being weak in that moment. That energy that's consuming me and making me a worse person to be around and distracting me from whatever productive thing I'm trying to do, it's all a waste, right? And so learning to domesticate that emotion, like it's like you still want the anger. I want to talk about anger in particular because it's a weird one. It's ambivalent in a way. It's like if you're just angry to be angry, well, then you're just going to hurt yourself and those around you. But if there's a genuine indignity occurring, this is where we get the term righteous indignation, right? When Christ flips over the tables,
right?
He's angry and he's directing that energy of that anger at a resolution to the problem. So you want to be able to harness the anger energy, but towards a resolution. Harness it constructively. Don't let it be destructive, whether that's self-destructive or destructive to those around you.
Yeah.
And so that one is, it feels like my life's test. I'm still constantly trying to like grab this frustration, and I've done the meditation and the yoga, and now it's all these other practices, like trying to be like step back, usa, ujjayi, breathe, and how to grab that energy without letting it make me the Incredible Hulk and get me to be the guy that does what needs to be done,
right?
Tactfully, competently, speak clearly to get things done,
right?
To channel it constructively, basically. So I wanted to bring up like a real example and then see if you had maybe one about you'd like to share.
Yeah. Well, a quick point about anger. I think it's, if you look at like the levels of energy, have you ever read that book? I think it's Ferguson. I don't remember the name, but there's a chart that you can look up online that kind of maps out these different emotions and where they land. In an energetic standpoint, from like low vibration all the way up to high.
Oh, like love is the highest frequency, right?
Yeah, like love and serenity.
Yeah.
And, you know, these
Yeah,
types
I've
of
seen
things
this
are
chart before. Yeah.
right. But anger is higher up the scale from, say, like apathy and hatred, or some of these other energies. But it is sort of bringing the soul, so to speak, up out of the depths. It can serve that purpose to kind of bring people into action and then into resolution. So it does, I think, have that effect. But like you said, like the kind of the weakness is in allowing those emotions to run the show. And it can be on all different levels. And even so, one of the things for me personally that I think desire is probably one of the things that I struggle with most, where you have a proper desire for greatness, or for say beautiful partner. And instead of like letting that completely rule your actions, I guess what I'm saying is, if you allow that to be your primary driving force, then that's showing weakness. So
it's like the law of reversal in a way, right? If you really show that you really want this particular woman or this particular type of woman, you're actually going to chase her away, right?
Sure.
Because she's going to want to be with a guy that doesn't need or want so badly to be with her. She's actually going to be more attracted to the frame that's purpose-driven, mission-driven.
Right. Even like love. Like you can love and have these feelings of like gratitude and just adoration for this individual. But if you're not able to maintain composure and control over those emotions, and then it's going to garner disrespect in the end, which is sort of this I guess you could say it's a paradox or a dilemma, where for the relationships that we care about the most, say our intimate relationships, if I have a girlfriend, and I love her to death, she's a cute, cuddly, amazing woman that I want to be around. Oftentimes, the more that you as a man express that emotion and that desire to be around her, to that love, for her, from her perspective, it causes the opposite to occur.
Right. Yeah.
The desire mechanism from her mind is kind of getting turned off by that.
Yes.
Which is one of these areas that we can kind of get into, of like one of the ways in which women may say they want a relationship to look a certain way, but in reality, they behave in a way that rewards different behavior.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. No, this is where it gets so fucking interesting too. And another thing that men are not taught this, right? I mean,
no.
I can only speak from personal experience, but coming into the world as a young man, early on in my relationships with women, I was under the impression that women used words to communicate information rationally, as I tried to do, as I think masculine energy in general tries to do.
Right.
And I always say masculine energy versus feminine energy instead of saying man, woman, because I think we're all a blend of both. And
Sure.
like clearly there's a lot of men with a ton of masculine and vice versa. So I'm not going to get gender or sex specific here, but just to say masculine energy, in my opinion, tries to use words to communicate information rationally.
Right.
I don't think feminine energy does that. Feminine energy appears to me to use words to signal different states of emotionality.
Right.
And I would say that it's often an encrypted message, if not always an encrypted message. I don't want to give a very specific example because these are personal conflicts, but let's just say I was once in a personal conflict with a significant other of mine, who was a woman. And she was telling me about a certain food I had asked about. I'd asked about the preparation of a certain food. And she got upset thinking that this was a food that I used to eat with one of my ex-girlfriends. And I'm like, what in the world does that have to do with I was like, I've eaten food with all kinds of people all over, like, no, this has nothing to do with, why would you think that? Anyway, so she's telling me this, right? Like, oh, I'm concerned about this food that you asked about because I think you're thinking about your ex. And long story short, we get to the end of that. The bottom of it was like, she was actually afraid about some other thing that was going on in her life. Like she was having this other situation with another person. That's what was actually happening. Like she was afraid about the situation and she wanted to talk about it.
Right.
But the way she communicated that to me was, I don't know about this salad thing that you're asking about because I think you're thinking about your ex.
Yeah.
Now, like it took a lot of, and this is where I think as a man, the best thing I think you can do in a romantic relationship is to set this tone for radical truth. And I don't think women can necessarily adhere to it in the same way we can, because if you're fortunate, you can find a woman there are women obviously that are intelligent. There are women that are capable of rationality. But I think when you get into these edges of feminine, the storm of femininity, words sort of go out their window and being just purely what they mean. Right? They're usually encrypted to have a deeper meaning. But through an ongoing rational discourse with her, we were able to get to this point, and she's very open, very focused on self-development. So we were able to get to that point together.
Right.
But my mind was completely blown at the end of this journey. I'm like, wow, so we started here talking about food and my ex, and we ended here. Like a totally unrelated situation between you and someone else that you're stressed about. Right. And so that, like, just to give you, for young men, it's like, that is something I wish someone had told me in my early 20s. It's like, now, you use words a certain way, young man. You might, you're trying to turn information into phrases and connect your mind with someone and like come to rational solutions for problems. Yeah. Women don't process the world the same way. They process the world through their emotions, right? How they're feeling. This is why women have intuition. And it's not to discount any of these things. Yeah. Quite the contrary, actually. I think women they're more in touch with the way nature actually is, because nature is somewhat irrational, right? It's chaotic, right? It's chaotic. Right. It's unpredictable. It's, amoral, right? Things happen, right? Meteors hit the planet and droughts and earthquakes and things happen that are just unpredictable, unexplainable, just not unexplainable necessarily, but unforeseeable, let's say. And the feminine intuition seems to be much more in touch with that. Also, really in touch with the complexities of social interaction, right? You can't, it's hard to sit down and just be like, oh, well, this person's going to do that and this person's going to do that. Like, you can't rationally determine what a human's going to do throughout their life. It's like, actually, they're going to act on emotions, and there's going to be all these complex social interactions, and the emergent properties of that system are completely unpredictable. Right. Well, in a system that's highly unpredictable, intuition plays a really good role, right? So
absolutely.
Obviously, rationality is important. We need to understand how things work and connect under common ideas and all the things we've talked about. But the feminine intuition is perhaps even more immediately important in most instances. So I say all that to say that I wish someone had told me that men and women just don't use language the same way at all times, and they don't process information the same way.
Right.
Although they're capable, like I think because I could sit there and hold space for her and I can hear, like I've learned to develop this thing where I can just listen and not be in my male mind solution oriented guy. I can just listen and like hold space and let the emotions kind of wash over you. That's why I'd say holding frame or being that deeply rooted tree is a very useful metaphor. Like you're literally just holding the space. You are being the structure. You are the rocks against which the ocean is crashing, sort of thing.
Right.
And it just needs to crash. You don't need to do anything about it. You don't need to solve anything. You just need to be there.
Right.
And similarly, I think women, when they get out of their emotional state, can connect with you rationally, and they can look back on themselves and be like, oh yeah, I was scared, but it came out as this, you know? So, that's it. I don't know. That would have been a very useful tutorial or orientation to the masculine, feminine dynamics that I wish I had.
Yeah.
20
Did you grow
years
up
ago,
with sisters? Or
no, you know, I have one younger sister, but she's 11 years younger than me.
Okay.
So she was almost more like a young, 11 years younger. She's like a daughter in a way, more than a.
Right.
I didn't see that. I wasn't as close to her in years, so the psychological development wasn't there for me. So yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with only brothers as well.
Right.
So a lot of this, some of the things that, we're talking about, some guys that grow up with sisters, they're like, oh yeah, it's just the way, it's the way my sister is. Like, and so it's just a part of their reality more. Yeah. Maybe that's part of it. And then for those of us who are more independent from that for a longer period of time, at least for me personally, I would, when I was around girls in school, it would be like, oh, they're fascinating, but I don't know what the hell is going on. And you build all these like romantic ideas of like who they are, what they're like, and what you think is going on. But yeah, there really is no, definitely no quality mainstream education process for men to understand the language of women. I've come across a lot of amazing resources and great educational pieces and workshops and whatnot to kind of grow my understanding of that aspect, but that's been self-taught. Like, you have to, but that's the world we're living in. You have to take responsibility over your own growth. And this is another like massive area of neglect, and I think in a lot of guys' lives up to this point right now, is there's so much energy, so much money being spent on their professional development, on their understanding of business or these aspects, but the relational side of things, understanding male-female dynamics, arguably it's going to have more of an impact, even financially, on your life than some of these other things. So it's such an important area of focus to take some time to understand and see how it's affecting your life. Yeah. Like divorce, like marriage and divorce is one of the most financially impactful things in life.
One of the biggest causes of male suicide too. Right. I think is typically, divorce or
financially aside. Your well-being, your everything is tied to that.
Yeah. And I mean, what is because there's a what the term people are using, a crisis of masculinity. A lot of people are saying masculinity is toxic, and it's like, well, that's obviously bullshit. We've had masculinity and femininity forever. Like, why is it all of a sudden toxic? I have thoughts around that. I think if I'm looking at it through the lens of statism, it's like, well, the three things the state is really afraid of: critical thinkers, unified populations, and high testosterone, independent alpha males, because those are who start rebellions.
Especially large groups of those.
Yeah, so if you get those three things together, right? A unified group of critically thinking, high testosterone alpha males, well, that's a fucking rebellion for sure, right?
Right.
That's the founding fathers, basically.
Right.
So my conspiracy theory guy would say, oh, that's probably why there's all this, mainstream media propaganda against toxic masculinity, et cetera, et cetera. But there has also been this, and then there's like kind of the feminist movement, which is a child of cultural Marxism. But there's this counter movement, which is this like hyper fiat masculinity thing where it's like, oh, bigger watches, more cars, more hoes, more boats. It's like, that's not masculinity either. That's just, flexing basically.
Right.
It's not what's serving the reproductive fitness and social cohesion of the group. I mean, maybe it serves the reproductive fitness of that individual, but even those guys don't have a lot of kids typically. They're just posting on Instagram with a bunch of girls. And so if I look at this through the lens of evolutionary biology, I think this was I think his name's Galloway, the New York professor guy. He speaks a lot on economic stuff and let's say socioeconomic topics. And he had a post recently that I thought was useful. He said that what women want in a man is they want a guy that can signal future resources, which doesn't mean that he has to be rich, but he needs to have she needs to be able to bet that this guy will be able to provide for her when they decide to have children, right? When they want to build the nest and she's going to stop working and have kids. Women want someone who can provide for their material needs as they go into motherhood.
Right.
Doesn't mean you need to be rich now, but you need to be signaling somehow through your intelligence, competence, relationships, whatever it is, that you will be able to bring resources to bear one day. Women also want a man who is kind. So someone who has genuine care for others in a way that's not necessarily going to be reciprocated. So the way you treat someone who you stand nothing to gain from would be a good proxy for just overall kindness. And the third thing that women seek in men is intelligence, right? Because, well, smarter people can solve more problems and typically bring more resources to bear, get people to like them, et cetera, et cetera. So, and he said that the best indicator for that was a sense of humor. That if a guy is funny or you can make a woman laugh, that's a pretty good indication that you're smart. And so I thought that was interesting. Like we almost, as you were saying earlier, women will say they want one thing, but again, women don't use words necessarily to convey truth. What they really want, I think, is best understood through this evolutionary biological perspective, right? It's like they want to have kids, they want to build a nest, they want a guy that'll provide for them. They want a man that will take care of them, right? Is kind, is generous, and then is intelligent, right? This all sort of makes sense. And then I thought a little more about it. I thought the opposite is also true with one modification, that what men seek in women, because I know what I want in a woman. I want a woman who's kind and that she's a genuinely good person, right? She cares for other people, that she's nurturing. That's what I want my children to be like. So that's what I want their mom to be like. And I also want a woman that's intelligent. Not only does that give you, like, if you're an intelligent person or aspire to be an intelligent person, you want to connect with someone that is also intelligent or aspiring to be intelligent, at least interested in the things you're interested in. And, if I want a woman that's funny too, like I love women that can crack jokes and wittiness, all right? It's one of the most attractive things in a woman, in my opinion. The only caveat would be, instead of being productive, I don't need the woman to be a boss babe, $1 billion business chick or whatever. I just want her to be reproductively fit. So I'd say with that one modification, instead of being productive, they need to be reproductive. It doesn't mean I don't want her not to be productive, by the way. I still want her to I don't want her to sit on the couch all day. I want her to have something going on, whatever your hobby is, your thing you're into, keep things running around the household, things like that. But I wanted to hear what your thoughts on that are. It's so is that what's going on here? That we use language in a certain way because we're serving a certain evolutionary purpose? I've also heard it put this way, by the way. It's a funny one. Men are interested in ideas. Women are interested in men. It's we are, and most, is it science, math, engineering, or the STEM, what are the STEM? Technology, science, technology, engineering, math. It's 90% male graduates.
Right.
But so we're very interested in ideas and tinkering and technology and all of this stuff, whereas women tend to be more interested in, which is also much more linear, by the way, cause and effect, as you said. Yeah. Women are more interested in social dynamics, which are very non-linear, unpredictable. What are your thoughts about that? Is this just are we just animals making sounds with our mouth trying to explain away our evolutionary impulses?
Well, I try to personally focus on behavior and just what works and what life is actually like. So when I observe male-female behavior, usually men are more interested in things and ideas, and women tend to be more interested in relationships and the flow of love, and emotional health and well-being. And that's what I see in my daughter. As my daughter's grown up, and I have a nephew as well.
How old is she now?
She's 9.
9.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. She's much more interested in, when I talk to her and we're FaceTiming with my parents, she's like, where's Bo and Belle? Are their dogs? She's interested in what they're doing. She's interested in Crew and my nephew and what he's doing. She's always looking at where are the people in my life, even the stuffed animals and the animals, whereas Crew, my nephew's much younger, but he's in the physical world. He's getting involved with superhero things and trucks and dinosaurs and these types of things. That's what we're drawn to, I think, in those, as just having our masculine essence flourish and the feminine as well. What was
I mean,
your other question?
It's just going back to the words thing. It's okay, men process information with words and women process emotions with words differently. Is that because of this evolutionary inclination, right? That really at the end of the day, and this is also would explain why men, right? We are programmed to, we're fertile basically forever, right? And we could make a baby a day.
Yeah.
Well, a woman's fertile for a small window and she can make one child every, 18 months, I guess, if you allow for some recovery time. I don't know how much recovery time's actually necessary. So the economics of reproduction are so fundamentally different.
Right.
That men have certain behaviors and women have certain behaviors, and women will just want to know that they can have this guy that will stick around, protect and provide despite his incentive, let's say, to go and spread his seed elsewhere. Is it is it that banal and biological, and that we're just describing that basically?
I mean, to an extent it is, I guess, because we have a certain biology, and I think women's biology is and men's biology, we are different, believe it or not. And for women, they have the natural vulnerability, where even in every month, they're literally bleeding. And if they're to be impregnated, they're for 9 months, they're in a state of complete like helplessness. So they have to use what, like speaking from an evolutionary biology standpoint, they have to use what they have, which is their intuition, their words, and their social acuity to assess, their mate's worthiness and to test as well. And so, but for a man, our nature is different, and so that's why, it's such a. It seems like it's odd that it's such a revolutionary thing, but yeah, what women are looking for in men is totally different from what men are looking for in women. And if you're going to be successful in this aspect of your life, if you're going to have successful relationships as a man, or a very successful relationship, you have to understand that. And unfortunately, it's just not so common. And so for a guy to kind of like get this area of his life handled, I do think it's important for you to take time to cultivate your understanding of the language of women and what it's like to interact with them, and what it is that they respond to, what is actually making them desirous of you as a mate, and as a long-term partner, but also as a sexual partner. What generates their desire? Because what I see a lot in, we're Bitcoiners, so we can talk about it in the Bitcoin realm, but a lot of guys are kind of thinking, well, once Bitcoin moons, then, I'll get a girlfriend, right? That's kind of the meme, right? And
terrible
so
strategy.
They're kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna maintain my current behavior, and then one day I'll have eternal riches and big titty bitches, right?
God, where do these memes come from?
6.15 Bitcoin. That's the key, right? But the reality, of course, is totally different, because you have men who seem to have it all. You've got guys here in Miami who are, they have the house, the Lambo, the like private jet, the helicopter to take them to the private jet. But do they have a fulfilling relationship to enjoy all of those things with?
Right.
Like, that's a whole other story, man. And from a woman's eyes, like, yeah, she's going to be drawn to material abundance. It's going to be a signifier of attraction. It's one of those components that she's going to take into consideration, but it's definitely not the whole story. And she's looking at you as a whole picture, and she is observing how you're responding to her, how you speak to her, how you treat her, and the way in which, how easily she can knock you off your center as well. That's pretty much what happens.
No,
the more you are around women.
Yeah, the term shit test, right? Where they're consciously or unconsciously, I don't know, but all women do it. Every woman I've ever dated does it.
Totally.
And you can't, again, younger man is like, what's your problem? Why are you starting a fight over nothing? But it's like, no, that's in their nature. They're like literally testing your integrity and your adherence to what you say you are, right? Like, you say you're going to do this. Well, like, are you going to follow through in times of crisis?
Yeah.
And there's no way for them to trust what you say about that, because that's what they're testing. Because they're testing the integrity of your words to your actions. So you can't just be like, oh, just trust me, bro, it'll work.
Right.
They're not going. That doesn't work for a woman. She needs to see you in action when someone goes to knock you off your center, as you said, do you come back to center, or are you actually deviating from center, becoming emotional, getting off track? Because if you're going to respond that way to a woman knocking you off center with some emotional, whatever, the ad hominem attack or whatever the thing is, then you sure as fuck aren't going to operate well under fire in the real world, right? When some real things start to go down and we need to defend the nest or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so when you look at it through that perspective, it makes so much sense. And so like for me, again, as a rational man, I think it's useful for us to see it that way. It's not her fault. You're like, oh, she was mean to me for no reason. It's like, that's not what it's about. She's following an evolutionary impulse to test your integrity of your word to your action.
Sure.
And if you are a man, then you will pass the test.
Right.
You're not going to get upset that she was mean to you or she gave you the test or whatever the thing is. Like, but without that knowledge, you wouldn't maybe understand that. You might just think that women and men are like from Venus and Mars or something like that.
Yeah. And I'd even add that the most feminine and the most, oftentimes the most desirable women will test you in ways that are very subtle. They're not, it's not like she's like being mean to being, you would never say that she's being mean to you. But she may express that she may express a desire, some sort of some subtle critique or some comment about something to see if you will adapt your behavior. Like whether it's like if you're going through the store with your girlfriend, and I saw this just like the other week. I was in Zara just getting a jacket last minute, and I saw a guy and a girl together, and he's like, well, what do you think of this? And he's like, I like this. What do you think of this? And she's like, nah, I don't like it. And then he just like takes it off and puts it back. But it's like, dude, that was the most clear shit test possible that like, it doesn't seem like anything from the outsider or even for that guy probably, but in her mind, it's like this, like really, you're gonna just put that back. You said you liked it. And then just because I'm not like that into it.
That one's so tricky for me.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust my sense of style so much. I'm always depending on other people to help me.
Okay.
And so that I would probably fail that shit test. I'm like, oh, really? I liked it, but I trust your sense of, you dress better than me. So I guess
it's a tricky one. Yeah. It's a tricky one because, you know, it's one of those, like, you want to be, for clothing especially, sometimes I'm not aware of the fashion trends as much as women typically are. So a lot of times they'll have like good advice of like, well, this is stylish right now, or this is like, you shouldn't wear that with your body type. So a lot of those things we need to kind of gain a better understanding of. But then as you develop and cultivate your own taste of things, you know, you can build out your own wardrobe and everything. But the more important thing is like for that, say that example, it would probably be, even if she was right. Yeah. Even if she was right, that it didn't look very good on him. Like a guy shouldn't even, for a masculine man to be like so concerned about his appearance is not very natural to begin with. So the better option would just to have been like, no, I fucking love this thing. Like I'm getting it no matter.
See, like, we already get into how complex this shit is.
Right. Yeah.
Already, because I don't know. My view would be that it's back to being honest with yourself about where you're competent and where you're not. And so like I'm not trying to disparage myself, but fashion's just not a strong suit of mine. I don't read about it. I don't study it. It's not my thing. Right. So I kind of outsource the expertise on fashion. I try to get inspiration from I have guy friends and girlfriends that have helped me figure that part of my life out. So being honest about that, I would probably fail that shit test. But if the opposite were true and I was like a fashionista and I'm like, oh no, this jacket looks good on me, I know it looks good on me, then knowing what I know about women, I would say, oh, it's clearly a shit test. Pfft, disregard, buy the jacket. But then, and then the concern about looks thing, I don't know about that. Like, there is a line, right? Where if you're overly concerned about your looks, that's more of a feminine quality, right? And they even talk about, I've heard women talk about guys like this, like guys that are overly dressed up, whatever, curated and manicured. Like they're like, oh, it's too much. It's like, I like a guy that's a little bit rougher around the edges. Yeah. So there is that, but there's also the other extreme where like, if you just look like shit and you're dressed terrible and you smell bad and you're ungroomed and you're well, then that's also not attractive. So
so there's an interesting side of this that I think is fascinating. Is like, for a woman, like, I think she'll appreciate a man who's well groomed and stylish and carries himself well and everything like that, and has good hair or good hygiene and well manicured. But she will also cringe by watching the guy prepare himself in front of the mirror, right? Yeah. So there's this thing where I think women generally, they appreciate the finished product. They want the guy to just get it. Like, they don't want to have him figuring out game or like have they don't want to see the process of like
the product, not the process.
Yeah, exactly. They want like having gone through the race and finished. I'm
sorry, but
go ahead.
When I was a younger man dating, I think because I was fresh out of college, I was broke basically, more or less, student, just starting a job. And some of the women I was dating, like you'd see them date older, richer guys. And at the time you'd be like, oh, like what? Like, why do women care about that? Like, this guy's just old. He's had more time to accumulate money. It's like, clearly I can do that too. I need a few years, right? But again, when you think about it through that evolutionary biological standpoint, it's like, look, women are decomplexifying the world around them. And so the amount of wherever that man's standing is in the hierarchy, whether this is a financial hierarchy, whether this is the football team, the corporate ladder, whatever it is. Right. And I think this is that term hypergamy, right? Men sort themselves into these hierarchies of whatever it is, and then women just peel off the top. Or the other saying is, women hang out at the finish line and fuck the winners kind of thing. Like that's how it works. It's not, it's nothing personal. It doesn't mean women are immoral or they're doing something wrong. It's like, it's actually a decomplexification strategy. Yeah. It's like, I don't need to learn every guy's story and like chart out where they're going to go in life. And it's like, you could just sort of run the numbers, so to speak, and just see how they shake out in the existing pecking order. And then you could also say, well, maybe he's not the corporate president yet, but he's 30 and I think he's competent and smart and he's funny. So that means he's intelligent. So I think he's got potential, right? And then women will bet on that. They will marry that guy. Right. And so I think it's just such a useful frame to like actually look at it that way. And it takes the personal sting out of these things.
Yeah, totally. You can't take it that personally, but you need to assess it. You need to take the information and use it in your life.
Exactly.
And another way that's done is through social proof. Like women are, they're looking at the male hierarchies, but they're also looking at what other women like.
Yes, for sure.
Like that's one of the main things that, a lot of guys, just for some reason don't understand. It's like if they're going to be wanting the man who other women want.
Yes. My mimetic desire in a nutshell. Yeah. And this is not fun to hear because it's like, it's kind of like one of those, the rich get richer sort of things. But one of the most reliable ways to date attractive women is to have dated attractive women. Like as soon as a current woman that might be interested in you has seen someone that you've dated and she's attractive, I think it works in reverse too. I'm not sure if it's so much about attractive, but like if you see a high status guy, like a guy, whatever, professional athlete or whoever that you might look up to, like, oh, he dated that girl. I thought that girl was like, okay. But now I think, again, we imitate the desires of others, especially others that are in a position we would aspire to be in. So there's always this confluence of factors taking place that are influencing our own desires. They're not just from us. For sure.
Yeah. I think what's maybe a distinction is like for men, the way it is for us, we see a woman, she's beautiful. So her biology carries that genetic value in the way she is.
Yeah.
And we'll interact with her and be attracted to her feminine essence, the way her innocence and the way she carries herself and the way she treats us. But for a woman looking at a man, she can't judge your ability to provide. She can't really judge your character or any of these other things by your appearance.
Yeah.
The things that she's more interested in. So she needs other inputs of the community to kind of determine that worth.
And she needs to shit test you.
Right.
Yeah, she needs to see you in some social situations. She needs to see you in social context, right? How does this guy handle himself at a party or a restaurant or whatever it may be?
Right.
Because the attributes she's looking for are not readily visible. Whereas for a man, they're mostly readily visible, right? It's like reproductive fitness. I don't care if you're the janitor or the CEO.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that's a great point. That reminds me of this quote that women fall in love with their ears, men fall in love with their eyes. That's why men tell lies and women wear makeup. Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I agree. It's just kind of the way we are. But this is so interesting because we're breaking it down on this like logical level. But a lot of times, like if for the guys who want to kind of level up this aspect, like you said, we always have to be leveling up and being around other guys who are doing that as well.
Yeah.
Because we're breaking it down on in a logical framework, it's not necessarily transferable to action a lot of times.
You got to practice.
Yeah, because women, women are viewing the world through their emotions, and if you are like a fun and like outgoing guy, then that's going to just do so much for you. It's like the funness factor is a huge part of this. But yeah, it can be a struggle because a lot of guys who are especially professionally driven, we live in the logical realm. Yeah. Like 7 days a week. Yeah. We're always like, what is the next deal? What's the next? We're trying to assess our reality. Yeah. And we live in that realm, but it's very important when you're dating and when you're around your woman to be able to like get into the present moment and like you said earlier, give her that space and that presence and observe. Because the feminine, the beauty wants to be seen. Yes. Wants to be experienced. Yeah.
Loved and cherished.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, to be that deeply rooted tree. That is, and it is, yeah. I would just campaign for switching from frame to masculine tree. That doesn't sound good. Just needs a flexible firm, maybe. Anyway, I think I may have kept you long enough. But this is all like just a sample of. I mean, this is another rabbit hole in and unto itself.
Sure.
Obviously, there's another element we didn't talk about as much, but knowing thyself, right? Like to know what you bring to the table objectively, right? Don't show up and act like if you're a good-looking, attractive guy, you should probably tone it down on kind of the cocky, funny, assertive thing. Like really just be yourself. If you're not so good-looking of a guy, you might want to tone it up actually, because there's all these different strategies of like how you're gonna stand out basically from the crowd. And if you already naturally stand out visibly, then you don't need to push so hard in that direction. Whereas if the opposite's true, then you might need to do so.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's really interesting stuff. I've been just getting into all this psychology stuff lately, so it's fun to talk about. I want you to tell us about though Citadel theory, what you're doing. I mean, because this fits into a lot of what we're talking about is leveling up, basically. I assume more focused on men, but tell us about what's going on with Citadel theory and what you're doing.
Yeah. So with Citadel theory in just a more general sense is this idea that we want to create ultimately a network archipelago of communities and cities that are built in a robust way that are not necessarily, that are free, where we can have independence. A lot of people think about Citadel. My ideal Citadel is like a cabin in the woods where I have a homestead and water source and food and everything, and I'm self-reliant. But I see the actual citadels being built and the network of them being a lot more of a dynamic, integrated process where you have communities spurring up and individuals building, defensible properties and whatnot within those communities. And so that's the important aspect of it. Like the community itself is the foundation of the citadels that we're building. So, and the more that I've gone about community development and engaged in these groups myself, the more I realize brotherhood, a strong, tightly knit brotherhood of men as the leaders of that community, that's essentially the bedrock of the community. Because, the community is, if we're going to build a castle, like, why are we building a castle? We're building it to protect the things we love the most. And the things we love the most are our families, our possessions, of course, but our relationships, our families, and our friends. So I guess what I'm focused on with Citadel theory is very broad. I guess what I bring to the table is some of my past experience. I tend to be more in that social realm where I was divorced 8 to 9 years ago, and I went through a process of personal development in that like social side of things where I was like, well, I don't want this to happen again necessarily. I want to be able to have quality options in the dating realm and be able to carry myself as a man better. So I went through that kind of heroic journey, so to speak. But then I'm bringing other guys who are very like successful businessmen into these environments as well. And they're able to offer other areas of expertise. So what I'm trying to do with Citadel theory is create deeper connections and a community of men to begin with. And ultimately it is bringing in women as well. Like I would love to have co-ed retreats where we are kind of engaging in both the masculine and the feminine dynamics, and because that's what it's about. Like I want to create the balance, but the leadership side of things is our responsibility as the man, where we have to take the first step, and for the citadels to be built, like that's going to be our job. It's the thing that we are most interested in, and so it's that's our move. And what it looks like right now is a series of events. I'm planning retreats that are very like adventure focused, where we're getting together in a place like El Salvador was a couple months ago. Bitcoin Jungle will be upcoming this year in Costa Rica, where we're going into these nature immersive environments to for one, kind of get out of our like common routine. And when you come out of that, you start to get a better understanding of what some of your limitations are, what some of the things that you need to focus on are. And it's also just fun to go into like dirt biking through the jungle, or lifting rocks on the beach to test your strength. So those are very like in-depth experiences that I'd like to curate a very like focused group of people for. But I'm also working on more of a pop-up lounge type concept where we can get together in a setting like this and talk casually about these types of things, and where you don't necessarily have to be worried about the woke police of being, capturing wrongthink. And yeah, creating a space where men can be men and enjoy themselves, like actually have fun and build relationships. And that's some of what I'm doing, but the community development is it's very popularized right now as well. Everyone wants to start a community. But it's such an organic process that it's hard to really like nail down and force.
No.
In my experience, you have to invite quality people together and provide some kind of like structure of like activities and adventures for them to go on, and then the community forms out of that experience. It's a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful stuff, man.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you have much success with that, and I hope more of these ideas get flowing with people. Because I think it's definitely very useful, especially for young men and women that are trying to figure all this stuff out about one another. So
yeah, absolutely.
Jon, man, thank you for coming to Miami. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Robert. It's been good to be here.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.